Hi everybody, welcome back to the third and final part, I hope, of this 1/48 scale Lysander build. This is the new Airfix kit. As you can see, I've been busy masking off the transparencies on the kit over the last probably 3 hours it's taken to get this far. And what that involves, because there isn't a die cut masking sheet available for the kit at the moment, I've just had to cut up tiny little pieces of masking tape. This is 1mm masking tape, and just line all the frames, as you can see. So that's a pretty tedious job, which is why I haven't really filmed it on camera, but it's just a case of patience, cutting up the masking tape. And what I try to do is cut the tape at an angle, so that gives you a point to fit right into the corner of each piece of transparency. Just gradually work around and build it up. What I'll do now is to use some of this liquid latex just to fill in the spaces between the masking tape. So I've just got some decanted, and we'll just use a cocktail stick just to fill in. Now, it is possible sometimes to use the liquid latex on its own without the masking tape. It depends really on how well defined the canopy frame is. I have to say that in this particular case, the Airfix kit probably does have good enough definition to be able to just drop the latex in. In fact, I did that on this rear window here, but I didn't want to do that for the whole of the cockpit transparency. So I spent the time this morning just doing that masking tape work, which is a bit tedious, but it's worth getting this right. It's a pretty major feature of a Lysander, the canopy, so it's time well spent if you want a nice looking model at the end of it. See, it just drops in and capillary action takes it to the edge of the tape. Need to make sure that we don't leave any spaces. Once the latex is dry, I'll paint the frames in the interior green so that it shows on the inside, and then we can think about doing the main scheme after that. So just leave this to dry now, and it'll just need a final check. Sometimes the latex just pulls away a little bit and releases, especially on transparencies, so you don't want to leave any open spots, otherwise obviously it'll spoil the effect. So leave that to dry. Come back in 20 minutes or so, and hopefully we'll be ready to put some paint on. Okay, so everything's sealed up. We used a combination of tape and the latex fluid to block off the cockpit openings, and you can see that I've also done a bit of pre-shading. Now, I don't always do pre-shading on models. I'm a bit cautious about it. Sometimes looks a bit false, if you like, but it really depends not so much on the pre-shading but how much of the top coat you put on and how you blend it in. but I did want something just to break the surface up without making it too aged. Sometimes I've used mottle masks in the past, but that gives the impression of a fairly worn airframe, and I don't want that in this particular case. So hopefully the pre-shade, although as I said it's not one of my usual techniques, hopefully it'll work out on this one. Now the paint that I'm going to be using for the top surfaces, I'm going to be using MRP. These are all lacquer based acrylics. The MRP is now my preferred paint really. Goes on really smoothly, lovely sort of satin eggshell finish on it, which actually if you're careful can take decals straight off without any gloss varnish. But I thought I had some RAF Sky in the MRP range and I don't, so my second choice is AK Real Colours. Now I have had some issues with Real Colours in the past in terms of colour match. Some of them have been pretty way off the mark I think, but the Sky is good. I used this on the Gannet last year, or the pair of Gannets that I did last year. It went on really nicely. Now I do use always the company's own thinners, so AK thinners for these. The MRP are pre-thinned, so you don't have to worry about that. But I've got the brush loaded up with the AK Sky. This is my Harder and Steenbeck Infinity CR Plus, and I was having a bit of problems with it last week when I thought I'd bent the needle, but I hadn't. It was just the seals were worn, so I've quickly replaced those and it's working fine now. So we'll get some of this Sky on and hopefully we'll be able to drift it on so that we can still see some of the pre-shading through it. The compressor's set to about 15 psi. It will sound louder than that because the microphone isn't far away in front of the airbrush. Okay, so at this stage, if you've used pre-shading, you just need to step back and just assess what the final effect is going to be like, bearing in mind that when you get a gloss coat on and subsequent varnish coats, it does tend to saturate the distinction in colours a little bit more. So you don't want to go too strong on the pre-shading. So I've taken quite a bit of that off. It looks about right. I've left it fairly dark at the front. That's just to replicate some of the engine staining from the cowling at the front there. But the rest is pretty clean. The final weathering level I'll gauge with the wash that I'll apply later on in the build. But for now I think that's more or less where I want it, so we'll leave it to dry whilst I do the wings. So moving on, I've masked off the underside of the fuselage, and for that I've just used some blue tack worms, I call them. So just rolled up something like 4 or 5 millimeters I find gives the right effect. And just lay that on the side of the fuselage, and then I'll just give it a bit more security by adding some tape just to hold it in place. And if we angle the airbrush correctly along the side, we just get a softened effect between the sky on the underside and the top camouflage colours. So I'll do that with the entire scheme. The next thing to do is to fill in the cockpit framing with some of the interior green, so that shows through from the inside. Now this is a step that I like to take in stages. In other words, put light coats on. I don't like to flood the masking tape, otherwise you can get some creep underneath. So just mist the paint on, and that way you should get a nice sharp demarcation when you take the tape off. Okay, let's get some of the camouflage scheme on now. So I'll start with the dark earth. This is the MRP paint that I'm going to be using. That's all the dark earth areas done. The MRP paint goes on really smoothly, that lovely eggshell finish. So I'm happy with that. Just got to mask off for the green now. Again, I'm going to be using the rolled up blue tack worms. So that's going to take a while. There's quite a lot of masking to do for the colour demarcation, so I'll get on and get that done, get the green on. Right, after a marathon session, probably just over 2 hours to get the airframe masked up, ready to put the green on. So this again is MRP's RAF dark green, and just mist it on the same as we did for the other colours, just to let some of the pre-shading show through. Okay, so the green's gone on okay on this fuselage. I'll do the rest of the airframe parts, wings, flaps and stuff, and once all that's done we can get all this unmasked, get a gloss coat on, ready for some decals. Okay, so we'll get the masking off. Already done one wing and it appears to have worked okay. Got that nice soft edge around the outside. Okay, I'm happy with that. The configuration of the Lysander makes it quite a tricky airframe to mask off. But hopefully we've got it about right. Just put a little bit of tape on the underneath of the wheel spats. That's just so that when we put it down on the bench, the paint won't rub off. Do the same with the tail just back here. Okay, so that's not too bad. I've got one or two little touch-ups to do. Just here the dark earth's a bit thin, so I'll just go back in and blend that in a little bit. There's a little bit more work to do on the cowling. It's a bit of a mismatch in colour there, but a couple of touch-ups on such a complicated airframe isn't too bad. Can't complain about that. So I'll get those touch-ups done, and then I'll apply a coat of Tamiya LP9 gloss lacquer, ready for some decals. Okay, our coat of Tamiya LP9 has dried. That's the gloss varnish. I've given it a couple of very light coats. That's enough to build up a bit of a gloss. Certainly good enough for the decals. These are from Cartograph, so really good quality. Should go on hopefully without any problems. Let's try one out. What I like to do is just test a new decal sheet with a decal that I know I can replace. So in this case I'll use one of the RAF roundels. I've got plenty of spares of these. So this is the scheme that I'm doing. It's option B in the kit. It's from a Polish squadron 309 based in Scotland, 1940. So it's just got a bit more colour than the other option in the kit. It's a bit more interesting, I think. So we'll go with this one. So I've got at hand the Microset and Microsol. A new clean brush. Doesn't have to be an expensive one for this work. So let's go. Just got some warm water. Cartograph usually release fairly quickly. Let's see how these do. So just put some Microset on. Put some Microset over the top, just carefully because the decal's still moving around a little bit. It's not gripped yet, and we'll just leave that alone for 5 minutes just to set up. Hopefully by that time it will have gripped onto the surface. Now I usually apply a couple of decals at a time, and that just gives you something to do while you're waiting for the decal solutions to act on the first one. Just helps you avoid fiddling around with it too much. So I'll apply one of the fuselage roundels as well. The decal's settled a bit now. Starting to see the detail underneath. So at this stage you can apply some Microsol. So at that point, with the microsol applied, it's essential to leave the decal alone. I'll go indoors, make a cup of tea, and I'll come back in 15-20 minutes, see what's happening with them. Okay, so I left the decal for 15 minutes. When I came back, the surface had wrinkled up a little bit, which is what you'd expect with the microsol. But at that stage, it's really important not to mess about with the decal. If you try to smooth the wrinkles out when it's still wet, you'll just fold them into kind of a permanent state. You'll never get them out. Whereas if you let the decal to dry naturally, it will, after stretching with the microsol, it will contract again, and it should contract into the panel lines as this has done. So as you can see, that's a really nice result. The subsequent top coat of gloss varnish will seal the decal in, and then the matte coat to follow should make the decal disappear into the rest of the paintwork, which is what we're after. So that's all good. The Cartograph are really good decals. You shouldn't really go wrong with them, providing you are patient, and as I said, you just let the microsol do its work properly without messing about with it. So I'll press on and do the rest of the decals, just use the same method, and once that's done, we'll come back, take a look at what the airframe looks like with all its decoration on. Okay, with the decals all applied, gone on really nicely, these Cartograph decals, as they usually do. So now it's time to do a wash, just to highlight the panels a little bit. For that, I'm going to use these AK panel liners. This is a set of different colours for different camouflage schemes. I'll be using the AK 2071, which is for brown and green camouflage. I'll just try it on the sky. I can't recall now which I used for the sky on the gannets that I did last year, but I'll just test. Possibly the grey and blue camouflage 2072 might do for the sky, but we'll see. I'll start with the green and brown first on the upper surfaces, and I'm just letting this into the panel lines. I'm not going to flood the whole airframe. These AK liners are my go-to now for panel washes. They're really versatile. When you come to remove them, you'll see how we can create staining effects where we want with them. They're an enamel product, so we, if needs be, can remove them with some mineral spirits, or white spirit as we call it in the UK, or enamel thinners will do. This shade, which is actually, it's sort of a chocolate colour, blends really nicely with both the brown and the green. So if you've not used the AK liners before, give them a go, see if you like them. As I said, they're my favourites now. These dry fairly quickly. In fact, the first application here on the back of the wing is already ready to remove. Now just use a cotton bud to clean off. So this has more or less dried. It might need a little bit of white spirit to reactivate it, but I'll just do the initial removal. This step, you've got to really concentrate on what you're leaving on the aircraft, because once you've got the gloss varnish to seal everything in, it does just that. You're not going to be able to remove any more of the wash. So make sure you've got it as you want it. So I'm just getting one or two shading effects with the cotton bud, which has got the wash on it, as you can see. You can rub that into the paintwork, just blend it in, and it just adds that layer of weathering to the airframe. Now, there are one or two areas that won't come off with the bare cotton bud, so I've just added a tiny little bit of white spirit onto the bud, and actually I've put it on and wiped it off again on the paper. It needs to be barely damp, otherwise all you'll do is rub the whole of the wash off, which we don't want. So that's just enough to get in and clean up. Just freshen the roundel up a bit. Okay, so I'll let that dry and press on with the rest of the airframe. Once that's done, we'll come back and get a coat of flat varnish on. Okay, I'm happy with the weathering. The wash has gone on nicely, so I can seal all this in and the decals with a coat of gloss, another coat of LP9 Tamiya lacquer, and then I'll flat it down, starting off probably with some satin. See what that looks like, and if it needs bringing down any more, I'll add some flat to it as well. All Tamiya lacquer. Okay, so that's the lacquer coats done, and I've settled in the end for the LP24, the semi-gloss. It's actually nearer matte than it is gloss, and it just gives a nice sheen, which I think is okay for the metallic cowlings and the doped areas of the fabric. So that's come out quite nice. Now the big test is removing the glazing, or the masking from the glazing. Hopefully the care that I took to get these little bits of tape on have paid off. Hope so. Well, I've got to be happy with that, I suppose. For such a complicated greenhouse, there's no touch-ups that I can see, and just a little bit of cleaning to do. I did actually pull the tape away at one point, and before I realised it, I'd just got the tiniest amount of paint inside, so it's just misted up the inside of the glazing, but that wipes off. These Tamiya cotton buds, the sharp pointed ones, are really good for getting in to just clean up that tiny bit of overspray. Okay, I'll do some assembly now, and I want to get the wings on first. And I've test fitted these several times, and they're a pretty snug fit, so they don't need a lot of glue on them. All I'm going to do is put some PVA, this is canopy glue, on the underside. Just a slight amount really, you don't want too much, otherwise it'll push out onto the transparency. You don't want any on the top surface because you've got this clear part on the inboard part of the wing as well. So this should be enough, just putting that bit of glue on the underside. So that was just enough. The glue did push towards the transparency, but it had run out by the time the gap was fully closed, the wing was properly located. So hopefully we'll get the same on this side as well. Push them home. Now we need to fit the struts straight away because they're going to add strength as they did in real life. Just cleaning up the gluing surfaces, getting the paint off. Okay, so I'll just let that assembly set thoroughly. It's obviously quite a structural assembly, the struts and so on, so it needs to be solid before we start turning the model round and adding other bits to it. The tail wheel on the kit's quite nice. It would have been easy for Airfix to have moulded that as one piece. But it looks better with the separate yoke. These are the landing lights, which are really nicely detailed. There are separate lamps and some clear screens or clear panels to go over the top of them. I've just backed the light itself with some Tamiya gloss aluminium just to give them a bit of a shine behind, fixing them with some canopy glue, and once they're dry I'll just put the clear lens covers on. These lenses are quite tricky to get located properly. The shape of them means that they only fit in one exact location. It's just the compound curve that's on them means that they, as I say, they only go in one way. So once you've found that, they do go in really nicely. I've just trimmed a tiny little bit from the outside of the hole that they go in, but once you've done that, they're pretty flush to the front of the spat, so that's really nice. Okay, the last few bits and pieces now, starting with the propeller. Got the bombs to do, the sliding part of the canopy and the navigation lights, and then I think we can call it done. Our aircraft had this twin Browning installation in the rear cockpit. Now, Airfix do give us the choice here of displaying this in a deployed position ready for use, but I've selected the stowed mounting here, so this just tucks underneath the rear fuselage like that. Then the rear canopy can go on with just 4 tiny spots of canopy glue. These are the navigation lights from the kit, and doing a quick check fit shows that they fit perfectly into the profile of the wing. That's not always the case with leading edge lights, but these are very good fit. So all we need to do is paint them. Now, I've checked my references. Airfix tell us to paint the whole of the lens in red or green, but my references suggest that just the bulbs were coloured. It might be one of those variations that change from airframe to airframe, but I'm going to go with just the bulbs painted. Airfix give us a little recess just to drop some colour into, so we'll just make sure we get the right side. Just having to remind myself which is which. Once the green and red are dry, just back them up with a bit of Tamiya lacquer sparkling silver. What that does is just increases the reflectance through the lens so that the red and green stand out a little bit more. Okay, the last job is to do the bombs. We've got a rack for each of these extensions on the spats and 4 to go on the rear. We adapted the rear fuselage in the first part of the build, I think it was, when we put the fuselage together, and that's just for this option in the Airfix kit. These bombs need quite a bit of work to them. The fins are solid at the back, the rear ring, so that's going to need a little bit of work. We can improve on that, I think. So let's just do the basic cleanup off camera, then we'll see if we can get that fin sorted out. Okay, so our last job is to fit the bombs. These are 20 pounders on this quadruple rack. We've got to fit 12 of these all together, 4 on the underside of the fuselage and 4 on each of the spat extensions. Now, the instructions in the kit are a little bit confusing about fitting the bombs. Here we're told to fit one or the other, either the 250 or the stick of 4 20 pounders. But here we can see both sets fitted at the same time. So it's a little bit confusing, and also on the colour call out we can see here all the bombs fitted together. So we'll just attach these with a little bit of CA. Now I think the mystery of the bombs and the confusing Airfix instructions are a little bit clearer now. A friend of mine over on Patreon suggested that actually these are £125 bombs, not the 250 that I thought they were, as I mentioned earlier on in the video. And he also directed me to photographs online showing the full loadout as provided by Airfix. So thanks for the heads up, Stu, really appreciate it. So it's really nice having people over on Patreon and here that have got your back and will point you in the right direction if you've made a mistake. Now the location points for these racks and bombs are very fragile, there's not much to hold them on. So we're going to have to be very careful with them. Okay, the model's going to need some careful handling with those very fragile bomb locations, so I'm going to have to be very careful with it. Okay, so there we are, all done, and that's been a really enjoyable build, one of the best Airfix kits, if not the best Airfix kit that I've ever put together. It's a nice combination of having enough detail without overcomplicating the build, and it would be easy to do that with a design of aircraft like this, with the high wing, the mounting of the wing around the canopy, which really is quite a complex airframe to model. But Airfix have really pulled it off. It's a lovely looking kit when it's done. And I particularly like the scheme that Airfix have chosen here, the Polish squadron scheme. Some nice splashes of colour, especially with the bombs fitted as well. So I'm really happy with how that one's turned out. So I'll leave it there and get some photographs for the end of the video as usual. I hope you've enjoyed watching along for these 3 episodes, and I know that lots of people have got the kit, and I really would recommend you get it out and build it. It's a shame to leave it in the box, really. It's such a nice kit to put together, and you get a great result when it's done. So I'll leave it there and move on next time to the next project on the bench, which is a pair of Tamiya 148 scale Tomcats, an A and a D. So we'll be getting on with that next week sometime. So thanks for looking in, everybody. I hope if you've got the kit, you're going to get it out and build it. You'll really enjoy it, I'm pretty sure, if you do, and good luck with it. So thanks for looking in, and see you soon for those next pair of builds. In the meantime, look after yourselves. Bye for now, everybody.